Hello, my name is Theron, and my family always said I was the reasonable one. Reasonable enough to swallow blame that wasn't mine. Reasonable enough to apologize to the man they kept forcing me to call my brother, even when he sabotaged my work. But the day my own father suspended me, told me I couldn't come back unless I bowed my head to Nolan, something in me cracked, and nobody in that house noticed. They were too busy smiling at the lie they built around me. What they didn't know was that the entire $900 million deal depended on me. And when they pushed me out, when they waited for me to crawl back, I left something on my desk that wiped the smile off every one of their faces. You ever realize your family wasn't protecting you? They were stripping you down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to take? That's where my story begins. The moment I finally said, all right, and everything they thought they controlled started to fall apart. I always arrived before the others. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was just how I'd been wired since I was a kid. Show up, do the work, don't complain. That morning, Houston's humidity wrapped around me like a second skin as I walked through the front doors of Marwick Industrial. The sun hadn't even warmed the glass yet, but something in the air felt heavy. I carried my usual black coffee in one hand, briefcase in the other. Walked through the lobby. The receptionist barely glanced up. Usually she'd at least nod. Small things. I noticed them. Upstairs, I reached my office. Same dull beige walls, same heavy desk, same view of the parking lot. I placed the coffee down with a quiet thud and adjusted the silver tie clip Mom gave me the year before she passed. Funny how a small thing like that, a tie clip, could feel like armor. I sat. My chair creaked. Something about the air felt off. No greetings from the interns, no casual office small talk. People walked by and turned their eyes elsewhere, like they all knew something I didn't, but I did know. Not the details, maybe, but the shape of it. There'd been an incident the night before. That's what my stepmother called it. Nolan had tampered with my proposal draft, swapped pages before the investor meeting. I called him out, not publicly, just in front of Dad. The look Graham gave me then, it wasn't shock. It was irritation, like I just embarrassed the family. Again, at 7:41, my phone buzzed. Come to conference room B. Now. That was it, from Dad. No greeting, no punctuation. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and headed down the hall. When I walked in, most of the senior staff were already seated. Graham stood at the head of the long glass table. Nolan wasn't there yet. I sat near the end. Eyes avoided mine. No one spoke. Graham didn't waste time. Theron, he said, voice flat. You need to apologize to Nolan. I blinked. For what, exactly? The scene last night. The scene? I echoed. Dad, he altered the proposal. Graham cut me off with a raised hand. This isn't about who did what. It's about optics, team unity, respect. I stared at him. Was he serious? You either apologize, he continued, or you'll take a mandatory 3-week leave. Unpaid. I knew that tone. It wasn't a request. It was a message. From the man who used to say I was too soft for business, who married a woman that treated me like a guest in my own home and raised her son like he was blood. Right then, Nolan strolled in, 20 minutes late. No one flinched. He leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head like he was watching a game. He glanced at me. Some people are only here because we let them stay. That one hit. Not hard, but deep. I looked at my father. He didn't blink. All right, I said. One word. That was all. No drama, No protest, just a quiet agreement. Let them think I gave in. Back at my office, I moved slowly. Took out my personal items, the picture of Mom, the coaster from a diner she loved, a pen I'd used to sign my first deal, a small supplier in Austin who later went national. Not that anyone here remembered that. People walked past my glass door, peeking in like I was already a ghost. I thought about the years, the late nights, the contracts I'd written, the relationships I'd nurtured, all credited to someone else, usually Nolan. All I'd ever done was play it straight, be the reasonable one, the mature brother, the cleanup guy for their messes. But in that moment, as I closed the box on my desk, I realized I didn't feel angry, not even betrayed. I felt done. Done trying. Done defending myself in a house that wasn't mine. Not really. Done proving anything. When I walked out of the building, the Texas sun hit like a slap. Sharp, hot, unforgiving. I passed the fountain Dad had installed last year, a peacock of all things. Said it symbolized pride and beauty. I thought it looked ridiculous. As I reached the lot, I glanced up. There he was, Nolan. On the second floor balcony, sipping coffee, smirk etched into his face like a badge. He really believed he'd won. He smirked like he believed I'd be crawling back. But he had no idea what I was capable of when I finally stopped trying to be their good son. I turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the lot without a glance back at the building. The printed suspension notice sat on the passenger seat like a silent witness, white edges curled slightly from the humidity. My tie was still straight, my shirt crisp, but inside, I felt like something had finally snapped, not in a loud, breaking way, but more like a quiet seam giving way after years of quiet strain. Traffic was light for once. I headed west. No destination in mind, just driving. For the first time in years, there was no meeting to prep for, no call to join, no fire to put out that someone else had lit. Just me, a car with decent air conditioning, and a creeping silence that felt stranger by the mile. I stopped at a red light and stared out the windshield like I wasn't really seeing anything. My body was moving, driving, functioning, but my mind was somewhere else. I remembered being 16 when Graham remarried. Nolan was already 17 then, all swagger and sarcasm, and within a week I'd been told, help him adjust, be patient, he's had it rough. Meanwhile, Nolan walked around like he owned the place, raiding my side of the fridge, lying to our parents about where he was, laughing when I got blamed. Mom had passed only 2 years before. I hadn't even learned how to carry that loss yet. But there I was, playing older brother to a kid who made it clear he didn't see me as one. I thought of college, how I turned down an out-of-state offer to stay and help Graham grow the company. He'd said it meant the world to him, said he trusted me. I think now he just liked that I never questioned him. Every time Nolan made a mess, I was told, set an example. Every time I tried to speak up, I was told, let it go. Don't stir things up. Every time I succeeded, someone else's name went on the plaque. And still, I stayed. Because I thought loyalty meant something. I parked in front of a Starbucks tucked into a quiet strip mall on Westheimer. It was early afternoon, but the heat still clung to the glass like sweat. I grabbed a table near the window, laptop bag beside me, suspension notice folded into my journal, and ordered a black coffee. No sugar, no milk, just like always. I opened my laptop just to do something. Habit, really. As soon as I connected to Wi-Fi, notifications pinged in. One caught my eye, a CC'd thread on internal comms. One I wasn't supposed to be on anymore. apparently forgotten when they yanked me from access. I clicked it. And then I sat back in the chair, blinking. There it was. A string of messages about the Anderson contract, the $900 million deal we'd been working on for nearly 8 months, the deal I'd personally brokered from the beginning. And now, chaos. Client requesting clarification on revised terms. Unclear whose point of contact now. Need someone who's handled negotiations directly? Who's got this? Wait, did Theron get pulled off this? And then a name I hadn't seen in months, Harold Givens, the client's VP. I'll say this once, if Theron Marwick isn't in the loop, we're walking. This deal was built on trust. You people screw that up, that's on you. I read it twice. My coffee went cold beside me. They didn't even know the client wouldn't work with anyone else. They'd suspended the one person holding that entire deal together. Graham had pulled me like I was a replaceable piece in some rigged chess game, and it turned out I was the only piece that mattered. I closed the laptop slowly. I wasn't smiling, but something inside shifted. Not pride, not revenge, just clarity. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct message. Evelyn Ward. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She used to work in procurement, smart and sharp, but she'd quietly exited last spring. Mismanagement. Creative accounting. Nobody said it, but everyone knew. Her message was short. I heard what happened. If you really walk away, they're done. Just be careful. No emoji. No fluff. Just a woman who knew too well how things worked behind closed doors. She had been pushed out too, not in the open, but by the slow method of discrediting, side conversations, and selective silence. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the reply. Then I put the phone down. There was a part of me that wanted to leave it all behind. Just drive west. Find a small town. Open something quiet. But another part, the part that had watched Nolan smirk from the balcony, the part that remembered my mother's voice telling me, "Don't let people teach you how small you should be." That part wouldn't sit still. I opened the laptop again, typed out a subject line, "Resignation letter, Theron Marwick." I started writing. A few lines in, I stopped. Not because I didn't mean them, I did, but something in me recoiled at the idea of giving them closure, of making it clean. Walking away would mean they got to keep the story, that I just couldn't handle the pressure, that Nolan won. I looked at the blinking cursor, then slowly I hit delete, one line at a time, until the screen was blank. I leaned back, folded my arms, and whispered to myself, "Not yet. Not this way." Not without making sure they remembered exactly who they tried to bury. I wasn't leaving quietly. Not this time. And the moment I walked back into that house, I realized the real battle wasn't at the office. The street was quiet as I pulled up to the driveway. Same cracks in the pavement I used to ride my bike over. Same mailbox leaning a little too far to the right. The sun was low now, throwing long shadows across the lawn. For a second, I sat in the car with the engine off, watching the porch light flicker on automatically, like it had been waiting for me. The Marwick house, beige brick, big windows, 2-story, always looked warm from the outside. But walking up those steps, keys still in my pocket, I felt that old familiar pressure in my chest, like air you have to fight to breathe. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The scent hit first, that mix of furniture polish and something synthetic, like the candles Valerie always kept burning too long. The place was quiet, but not peaceful. More like restrained, like the walls themselves were holding something back. I walked past the foyer, through the front hall, and there they were. The gallery of family photos lining the wall. Graduations, ski trips, smiling group shots at the 4th of July cookouts. In the earliest ones, I was there, front and center. But as the years passed, I drifted toward the edges. Eventually, I disappeared altogether. In one Christmas photo from 2 years ago, Nolan was wearing the watch I'd bought Dad for his birthday, the one I never saw him wear. My fingers brushed a small silver frame near the middle. A birthday party. Maybe I was 10. A cake. I remember it now. Chocolate, double layered. Nolan's hand, accidentally swiping it off the table during the photo. It landed upside down on the floor. Frosting smeared everywhere. They'd all laughed. "Boys will be boys," Valerie had said. Graham looked annoyed, not at Nolan, but at me. "Be mature, Theron. He's still adjusting." I'd been the one who apologized. I still remember how the words tasted. Dry, forced, not mine. Back in the present, I exhaled hard and kept walking. The kitchen lights were on. I heard voices behind the closed pantry door. Low at first, then rising. I slowed my step. Didn't mean to eavesdrop, but didn't stop either. Valerie's voice. "You suspended the wrong one, Graham. Nolan doesn't know anything about that contract." Silence. Then Graham, "Theron will apologize. He always comes back. He needs us." That hit me harder than I'd like to admit. Not, "we need him." Not, "he's part of this family." Just, "he needs us." Like I was a tool. A faucet. A damn backup generator. I stepped back before they noticed I was there and turned into the living room. Nolan was already on the couch, shoes kicked off. One foot propped up on the coffee table. Same table I'd helped Graham assemble in the garage 8 years ago. "Back already?" He smirked without looking up from his phone. "Didn't last long without Daddy's approval. Huh?" I didn't answer. Same tone, same smugness. Like all those years of undermining me had been a game he was still playing. I walked past him slowly. I could feel his eyes following me, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of meeting his stare. He chuckled. "You always were soft, man. Thought you had more grit than this." I stopped at the hallway drawer near the stairs, the one where I'd left a few personal documents. It hadn't been touched. Inside was a small manila folder, a few papers, and a black velvet box. I opened it. The silver tie clip. The original gift box, tucked away like it didn't matter. My mother's initials were still etched inside the lid. I slipped it back into my pocket, not saying a word. Behind me, Nolan shifted on the couch, clearly waiting for a reaction. I gave him none. "I didn't come here for you," I said, voice steady. His grin faltered for just a second. A crack. Barely visible, but enough. I straightened, closed the drawer, and walked toward the door. Before I stepped out, I heard them again. Graham and Valerie still in the kitchen. "He'll break," Graham said, almost dismissive. He always does. I paused with my hand on the knob. They still thought I was the same son who never fought back, but the next morning proved how wrong they were. The first light hadn't even touched the blinds when I opened my eyes. No alarm, no sound. Just the echo of my father's voice lingering in my mind like a stain I couldn't wash out. "He'll break. He always does." I laid there for a moment, listening to the silence around me. The apartment was still, too still. Not cold, not sterile, just silent in a way that used to feel like loneliness. But not this morning. This morning, it felt like space, like possibility. I got up, walked barefoot across the hardwood floor, and brewed a pot of coffee. The cheap kind, strong, bitter. I poured it into the mug my mother gave me before she passed. A chipped Navy cup with a faded "Best decisions take time" written across it. I sat down at the kitchen table, just me and the screen of my laptop blinking back at me. Emails, missed calls, messages. 12 calls from Sylvia, the executive assistant who never called anyone twice, let alone a dozen times in one night. 2 emails from legal, and 1 direct message from Harold Green, CEO of the partner firm we'd spent nearly 8 months negotiating with. "Are you still leading the negotiation on the 900 mem contract?" Not Graham, not Marwick Industrial. Me. I stared at the screen, coffee cooling beside me. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my father's voice again, but this time it didn't land the same way. It didn't cut. It clarified. They really don't get it. They still think I'm standing in their shadow, waiting to be invited into the light. But I was never in their shadow. I built part of that damn house, and they just painted over my name. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marcus Hale. We weren't friends, never had lunch, never even small-talked in the elevator, but we'd worked on enough contract reviews to know we both valued precision, and the tone in his voice told me this wasn't a courtesy call. "Theron," he said, no preamble, "you need to understand something." I didn't say a word. I just waited. "They suspended the wrong person," he continued, his voice tight. "The board is already catching wind. And if the partner company finds out about the internal issues, they'll pull." I could hear him shuffling through papers on the other end. "Your father's trying to patch it up before anyone above him starts asking questions. But you're the only one who's been in the room with Green. You're the only one he trusts." "So?" I said calmly. "So," Marcus said, almost exasperated. "If you walk, it won't just be a bad week. It'll be a disaster. And guess who's holding the lighter when it all burns down? Graham and Nolan." That last part almost made me smile. I hung up without another word and stared out the window for a while. He was right. I wasn't the youngest son anymore, begging for a place at their table. I was the table, the contract, the relationship, the entire negotiation structure built on my time, my reputation, my damn weekends. And now they were panicking. My phone buzzed again. A message this time, from Valerie. "We're having dinner tonight. Come early. Your father wants to talk." "No, please. No, we'd like to see you." Just expectation. I laughed. Actually laughed. It startled me. The old version of me would have dropped everything. Thrown on a clean shirt, shaved, shown up 5 minutes early, hoping that maybe this time there'd be recognition, some acknowledgement, but not today. Today, I wasn't looking for approval. I was looking for truth. I opened my laptop and started a new message addressed to Harold Green. "Dear Mr. Green, I am currently reassessing my position at Marwick Industrial. I will update you personally on how that affects our engagement." Short, clean, no emotion. But a bullet through the heart of the house of cards they were still pretending was solid. I clicked send and sat back. Across the table was the small black velvet box I had left on the hallway drawer last night. I'd taken it with me without thinking. But now, it sat in front of me like it had something to say. I reached out and rested my hand on top of it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. That silver tie clip used to remind me of who I was trying to be. Now it reminded me of who I really am. "They have no idea what's coming," I whispered to the empty room. And by noon, they made the mistake that sealed everything. Because the moment I walked into that restaurant, I learned just how far they were willing to go. The hostess greeted me like I was someone important. Maybe I was, to her. Just another suit, another reservation with a polished name attached. "Private room, Mr. Marwick. Right this way." She smiled, but I couldn't return it. My hands were cold. The dining room was small. Low lights, polished oak, white linen that had been pressed that morning. A room designed to make a man feel respected. Or controlled. Graham sat at the head of the table, a glass of water resting untouched in front of him. Valerie to his left, her hand placed lightly over his as if they were about to pray. Nolan lounged opposite, legs crossed, already sipping something dark over ice. He didn't look up, just swirled his drink and smiled like he knew what was coming. And I knew then, this wasn't dinner. It was a setup. "Son," Graham said, standing just slightly, that practiced warmth dripping from his voice. "We're worried about you." I stayed standing for a moment longer than necessary, studying the table. 3-place settings, one for me. No menus. I sat down, slow. "Worried." Valerie leaned in. "You've been under stress? All of us have. But the way things happened at the office..." I cut her off without raising my voice. "The way things happened..." Nolan chuckled softly, still swirling. "You storming out like that didn't exactly scream stability." Graham cleared his throat. "Let's not start pointing fingers. We want unity. We need it, especially now." That word again. Unity. They used it like a leash, when they wanted silence, when they wanted me small. I didn't speak. I watched. Nolan reached into a leather folder and slid a few printed pages toward me. "Here," he said, smug as a snake, "just so you're clear on what we're dealing with." The top page was labeled Internal Incident Documentation. I didn't pick it up, just read the bolded lines. Employee demonstrated hostile tone during discussion. Exhibited unprofessional aggression toward peer. Showed repeated disrespect toward leadership. Each phrase more distorted than the last. A narrative written by someone who had never been in the room, or worse, someone who had. "This is your version of reality?" I asked. Graham didn't flinch. "If you don't apologize today, it goes to HR. And the board." There it was. The ultimatum, gift wrapped in calm voices and clean paper. It wasn't about facts. It was about control. About making me kneel again, but this time with signatures and witnesses. The ache in my chest wasn't from fear. It was older. Something quieter. I thought about every time I'd been told to be the bigger person. Every "let it go" that followed one of Nolan's mistakes. Every time I swallowed anger to keep the peace. I'd believed that made me stronger. Now, I wasn't so sure. Valerie reached across the table, her voice soft, sugar-coated. "Theron, honey, Nolan is the son who truly understands family loyalty." The room went still. I couldn't even blink. I just stared at her. Of all the knives they could have chosen, that one cut the deepest. Not because it was cruel, but because it hit the exact wound they'd carved into me for years. That I didn't belong. That I was tolerated, not loved. That my silence was never strength, just convenience for them. I looked at Nolan. He grinned like he'd won something. But I didn't break. I turned to Graham. My voice was low, almost calm. "You're asking me to apologize for something I didn't do. Again." He stiffened. Not visibly, not to someone who didn't know him, but I saw it. That flicker behind his eyes. That frustration he always hid behind reason. Nolan smirked deeper. "So, what's it going to be?" I stood up. My chair didn't screech. I didn't slam anything. But my hands... They trembled just slightly as they left the edge of the table. years of silence vibrating through my bones. I need air. I didn't wait for permission. I just walked. The hallway out of the private room was longer than I remembered. Or maybe it just felt that way now, like walking through cement. When I finally reached the sidewalk, the sun hit me like a slap. Too bright, too real. I leaned against the brick wall outside the restaurant, trying to breathe. My stomach turned. I couldn't tell if I wanted to cry, scream, or disappear. And then, standing on that sidewalk, I realized one thing that changed everything. Because I wasn't falling apart. I was waking up. The cold air hit my face in waves, sharp and honest. I let it steady me. No more trying to decipher their words. No more twisting myself into someone they could tolerate. The family I thought I owed everything to never truly saw me. Not as a son, not as a partner, not as anything but a tool they could mold when needed. I walked toward the parking lot, my steps slow but sure. Valerie's words played on repeat in my head. Nolan is the son who truly understands family loyalty. Loyalty. They always loved that word when it worked in their favor. But now it sounded different, hollow, manipulative. I'd worn that word like a badge. Now I saw it for what it had always been. A leash. I had spent years proving my worth, staying quiet, staying loyal, to people who were never loyal to me. The street traffic picked up as I pulled onto Westheimer, late afternoon sunlight slanting through the windshield. I drove with no music on, no distractions. Just me and that one bitter clarity carving through years of confusion. When I stepped into my apartment, the silence greeted me like an old friend. But it no longer felt like isolation. It felt like space, possibility. I set my keys down, kicked off my shoes, and sat at the kitchen table. My laptop was still open, the screen dimmed but awake. I tapped the space bar. There they were, the audit files, the full negotiation trail, the direct emails with the partner company. Every detail of that $900 million contract, every version I'd reviewed, every phone call I had documented. Not revenge, leverage. They thought they could threaten me with paperwork. They had no idea what I still held. Just as I began opening the files, the doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent. I froze for half a second, then stood. Outside the door stood a courier in a navy jacket holding a large envelope. "For Theron Marwick," he said, then handed it over without eye contact and walked away. I shut the door slowly, my chest tightening even before I opened it. From the HR department. Of course. I slid the papers out. The top page read, "Preliminary Behavioral Review Notice." The phrases blurred together at first. Allegations of workplace disruption. Pattern of hostility. Potential violation of company conduct policy. They were escalating. This wasn't a warning. It was a threat, a legal maneuver to corner me into submission. Their way of making sure I knew who still had the upper hand. After the staged ambush at the restaurant, they needed to make the next move look official, clinical, procedural. I sat back on the couch and stared at the wall for what felt like an hour. The notice rested in my lap, heavy in ways paper shouldn't be. There was a version of me, the old version, that might have broken here, might have picked up the phone, called Graham, apologized just to end the noise, but not this time. "They're not doing this because I'm weak," I whispered into the room. "They're doing it because they know what happens if I stop being weak." I got up, walked back to the table, and opened a new folder on my desktop. I began dragging in files, emails Nolan had sent passing off work he never did, timestamps of projects I completed that were later signed by him, Spreadsheets Valerie had edited to hide discretionary spending. Evidence, proof, facts. I wasn't building a bomb. I was stacking bricks, one by one. Half an hour passed. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number, but I answered. "Theron," a steady voice said. "Jordan Reese here." I straightened in my seat. Jordan Reese, the CEO of the partner company, the one who trusted me with the biggest deal of my career. "We've heard some confusing things," he said. "Rumors of a suspension." I didn't answer immediately. He continued, "Before we proceed with any formal signing, I need clarity. Are you still leading this deal?" The stakes hit me in the chest like a drum. If I said no, the contract collapsed. If I said yes, I became the linchpin they couldn't remove. "I'm currently reassessing my position at Marwick," I said, calm. "I'll update you personally." Jordan didn't argue. "Understood. Keep us posted." He hung up. I set the phone down next to the HR envelope, then picked up the old gift box with the silver tie clip, the one I found in the family house. I placed it beside the pile. Not for comfort, for clarity. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. But by the following morning, they went after the one thing they thought would break me for good. I woke to the sound of pounding on my front door. Heavy, deliberate hits that rattled the frame. Not the kind of knock you get from a neighbor or a delivery. This had intention behind it. I pulled on a t-shirt and walked down the hall, every step tightening the knot in my stomach. When I opened the door, I found a uniformed police officer standing beside a Marwick industrial security manager. Both wore expressions as neutral as glass. "Mr. Marwick," the officer said, "we're here regarding a formal complaint filed against you." A complaint? From who? The security manager handed me a sheet. "There are allegations you accessed restricted financial documents after your suspension." I stared at him, stunned. Those were my own contract files. I created them. Neither reacted. This wasn't concern. It wasn't protocol. This was orchestration. A cold wave washed over me. Not fear, but something closer to betrayal sharpened into steel. This wasn't just family pressure. This was an attempt to stain my career permanently, to trap me in a corner I couldn't climb out of. After they left, I shut the door and immediately called Marcus Hale. He answered near the first ring. "Marcus, tell me what's going on." He exhaled, tight and strained. "Theron, someone submitted altered access logs last night. It looks like Valerie is pushing this. Hard. They're trying to box you in before the board meets." I rubbed my forehead, pacing the living room. "So, I'm the target now." "It looks that way," he said quietly. "They're desperate." Of course they were. If I left, the biggest deal they had in a decade would fall apart, along with the illusion that Nolan could step into any leadership role. Valerie wasn't defending the company. She was defending her son's image. Graham, meanwhile, was defending his pride, and both were willing to burn me alive if that's what it took. I grabbed my keys and headed to the car. Driving downtown, the morning traffic blurred past without meaning. My phone buzzed at a red light. Jordan Reese. I hesitated before answering. "Jordan." "Theron," he said, voice steady but probing. "We're hearing concerning things from your side. Tell me this isn't true." My grip tightened on the wheel. If he believed this lie, the deal collapsed, taking my years of work with it. "I'll explain everything," I said. "Just give me time." "Time is running out," he warned. The line went dead. By the time I arrived at headquarters, my pulse had settled into a slow, cold rhythm. The lobby felt different now, less familiar, more hostile. I stepped inside, and there he was, Nolan. waiting like he'd rehearsed it. He stood beside two board members, wearing a suit that didn't fit his swagger, but he forced it anyway. His hair slicked back, expression smug, as if he'd already claimed a throne. "Big morning for you, little brother," he said, tapping the elevator button. "HR wants you upstairs." That word, brother, felt like a slap now. Not affectionate, not even mocking. Weaponized. I didn't react, not outwardly. I just observed the way his eyes flicked to the board members, making sure they heard him, making sure he established dominance. We rode up together, tension suffocating the small space. When the doors opened, Nolan strolled ahead, humming under his breath. Inside the HR conference room, the air felt cold enough to sting. A woman from HR laid out printed screenshots and logs across the table. "Mr. Marwick, these entries show activity on your account during your suspension." I leaned in, scanning the timestamps. They had built an entire narrative: false downloads, unauthorized access, movement of funds, but they made one mistake. The timestamps matched hours when my laptop had been powered off. I remembered shutting it down. I remembered exactly where I placed it. And my backup logs confirmed it. They underestimated me. Again. I straightened in my chair. "I'd like to make a formal statement." The room went still. "And I want the board to hear it." From the corner of my eye, I saw Nolan's expression shift, confusion flickering beneath confidence. He didn't expect pushback. He certainly didn't expect composure. "I also have evidence to present," I added calmly. "Quite a bit, actually." HR exchanged glances. This was the moment everything shifted, not loudly, but silently, like a door clicking shut. When the meeting recessed, I walked into the hallway just as Graham approached from the opposite end. For years, seeing him made me instinctively straighten, lower my gaze, fall back into the rhythm of the youngest son trying to earn approval. Not today. I walked right past him without slowing down. And for the first time in my life, he didn't know what to say. Because what I revealed in that boardroom didn't just change the meeting, it killed every lie they built their power on. And the moment I opened my laptop, the entire room shifted. The boardroom felt airless, like every breath had been held since I walked in. Graham sat at the head of the long mahogany table, his arms folded like stone. Valerie was beside him, poised, unreadable. Nolan leaned back in his chair, already wearing that smirk, the one he used when he thought he'd already won. But they didn't see it coming. No one did. I connected my laptop to the projector. With one click, the screen lit up behind me, and the timeline audit appeared. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence work for me. "Here's a full log of activity tied to my account over the last 10 days, I began. "You'll notice this section, March 14th through 16th, shows access to financial documents supposedly during my suspension." I advanced to the next slide. "Here's proof my laptop was powered off during those timestamps." I clicked again. "And these?" I pointed to the list of IP addresses. "They don't trace back to my apartment. They trace to a device inside the CFO's private network, specifically Valerie's home office." You could hear the shift in the room. Chairs stiffened, heads tilted. The air didn't just tighten, it collapsed inward. Marcus Hale cleared his throat. "These logs appear manipulated, and the access clearly originates from inside the finance division." Valerie's face went pale. I didn't stop. Next came a series of internal emails, one from Nolan requesting temporary override access to my systems for contract review. I let that sit for a second. Then I played the voicemail. Valerie's voice, hushed but unmistakable. Once he's out, the contract credit goes to you." There was a murmur in the room. Someone at the far end whispered, "That's fraud." Another dropped their pen. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt a dull ache in my chest, because it didn't have to be this way. I looked at Graham, hoping for some flicker of awareness, maybe even shame. But he didn't move. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he couldn't swallow. He finally slammed his hand on the table. "Why would you do this to your own family?" Before I could speak, Nolan blurted out, "He's lying. He doctored all of this." I raised my hand calmly. If I wanted to fabricate evidence, do you really think I'd walk into this room alone? Marcus stepped in, his voice calm but resolute. "All documents have already been verified by our external forensic partner. Time-stamped, authenticated, undeniable." Graham's face broke, not just emotionally, physically. The set of his shoulders caved. The man who once ran boardrooms like stages now looked like he didn't know what room he was in. The board fell into quiet deliberation. Cynthia Ward, the lead board member, finally stood and spoke with crisp finality. "We're calling an immediate ethics vote." And it all happened so fast after that. Valerie, suspended pending full investigation. Nolan, stripped of all project access, effective immediately. Graham, barred from making any disciplinary decisions related to me. I didn't say a word during the vote. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I wasn't there to win. I was there to finish it. Security stepped in. As Nolan stood, his calm shattered. He lunged across the room, pointing straight at me. "You think this fixes anything? You ruined my life. No one will ever trust you again. You hear me?" I took one step back, not in fear, just to keep the line between us clear. "I won't need them to trust me," I said quietly. "I already secured my future the day you tried to destroy it." He shouted something else, but by then, the guards were pulling him back. Valerie didn't scream, didn't protest. She just turned her face toward the window, refusing to meet anyone's eyes, especially Graham's. The room was empty within minutes, except for Graham. He stayed in his chair, unmoving. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Smaller, too, like someone had carved the authority out of him. "I trusted the wrong people," he said, barely above a whisper, "and I failed the right one." I stood by the door. My fingers grazed the frame, steadying myself. He looked up at me. "Will you come back? We need you." I met his eyes and answered, not with bitterness, but with something heavier. "You don't need me," I said. "You need accountability." Then I walked out. As I stepped through the hall, employees turned their heads, not with pity, not with curiosity. They stepped aside, gave me space. Some nodded slightly, not out of fear, but something quieter, something deeper, respect. In the parking garage, I leaned against my car and finally let out the breath I'd been holding for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. I'd survived the fire. But the burn marks, they'd stay. And because when I woke up to the call from the federal auditors, everything changed again. It was early, the kind of morning where the sun hadn't fully claimed the sky yet. My phone vibrated across the nightstand. I picked it up groggily, expecting a reminder or maybe another call from Graham. But the voice on the other end was precise, clipped, professional. "Mr. Marwick, this is the Federal Contract Oversight Division. We've received a whistleblower packet regarding your company." I sat upright. "Excuse me?" "There's evidence of internal fraud and manipulation of federal contract records. We'd like to meet." I hadn't sent anything. So who did? By midday, I was sitting in a quiet federal building, sterile walls and low voices echoing through narrow hallways. They led me to a small meeting room, then slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts, screen logs, email chains, internal memos. I recognized some of them. Others were new. They were damning. An internal employee submitted this anonymously. The agent explained. They witnessed Nolan accessing your system after hours. The whistleblower remained silent until the fallout from your board meeting made its way through the company. I leaned back, silent. Somebody inside had finally stepped forward. It wasn't just me carrying this weight anymore. We're opening a formal investigation. Valerie Marwick is now facing potential federal charges for evidence tampering, and Mr. Nolan Marwick's financial conduct over the past 2 years is under renewed scrutiny. The agent paused. Your father, Graham Marwick, will be required to appear before a compliance review panel. I didn't feel victory, just stillness, like something I'd been holding on to had finally slipped out of my hands. And it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. When I got home, the light from the late afternoon sun stretched across my apartment floor. Everything felt untouched, like the world outside had moved on while I'd been inside a storm. My eyes landed on the small wooden box on the counter. The tie clip. I hadn't touched it since the day they suspended me. I picked it up this time. Sat down slowly on the couch and opened it. Inside, the engraving I'd once stared at with pride now stared back at me with a quiet accusation. To my son, the one I'm proud of. I ran my thumb across the words. The message hadn't changed, but its meaning had. It wasn't a token of love anymore. It was a reminder of how deep the illusion had gone. How far they were willing to go to keep me believing I mattered, until I stopped being convenient. And still, I didn't throw it away. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Graham. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Theron. His voice cracked. I didn't know. I didn't want this. He sounded older, more than I'd ever heard before. I believe you didn't want it, I replied. But you let it happen. I want to make things right. There was a pause. I didn't fill it for him. He sighed. Can we talk? We can, I said quietly, but things won't go back to how they were. I meant it. That night, while washing a plate that had been sitting in the sink for 2 days, my phone lit up again. This time, Jordan Reese. We're pulling out of the deal with Marwick Industrial, he said, direct as ever. Too much exposure, but I froze. We'd like to offer you full project leadership, independent, your own structure, full contract, full control. I didn't say anything for a few seconds. Theron, you still there? Yeah, I breathed out. I'm here, just wasn't expecting that. I think you've earned it. Let us know soon. After I hung up, I didn't sit back down. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and the tie clip, and headed out. 20 minutes later, I stood on the edge of the overlook, just west of downtown. It wasn't fancy. Just a small patch of pavement and railing above the city skyline. I used to come here when I felt invisible, when I needed to remind myself the world was bigger than office doors and family names. Tonight, it looked different. I slipped the tie clip into my pocket, not as a badge of loyalty to them, but a marker, a scar, a story, a reminder of what I'd been through, and who I wasn't going to be again. I called Jordan back. I'll do it, I said. But this time, I'm building something that can't be taken from me. My family may never understand what they lost, I thought, as I looked out over the lights of Houston, blinking softly below me, but I finally understand what I gained. And somewhere in the distance, the wind picked up, not loud, just enough to stir my collar. I closed my eyes, because sometimes the life you build after the fire is the one you should have had all along. And I was finally ready to start that life.